Welcome back to Those Happy Places, the podcast that treats theme parks, rides, and attractions like literature. I'm Buddy Duquesne.
And I'm Alice White.
And Alice, we are back for episode 2 of Birds of Paradise, an ongoing and ever-spiraling analysis of the Enchanted Tiki Room.
That's right. We are back with episode 2. Last time we talked about the Enchanted Tiki Room, what it is, what's in it, the music you hear, just some very basic top-level stuff about the Tiki Room. And so this episode, we're going to go one layer deeper.
Yes, consider this the the dive just below the surface of what is being presented in the Tiki Room, because there's still stuff to analyze about it. And I feel like if we're going to talk about it as our primary text through all of these different lenses, we should have kind of a second reading going here where we kind of analyze what's being communicated by the Tiki Room. How does it tell its story? And what are some unique things about the story it tells in its entirety? And Alice, one of the things, perhaps the most obvious thing, the thing that more than anything makes the Tiki Room unique to me, is that it has a food item associated with it.
You're absolutely right. We thought for a while to find another example of another ride or experience that has such a focus on food, and we cannot find one that even comes close to matching the Dole Whip.
Yeah, and the Dole Whip, or the Dole Float, which is my preferred way to consume Dole Whip. The Dole Whip and Dole Float are two items that are available as sort of an attachment to the Tiki Room. It was only recently that it was available anywhere else in the park, and that's actually just right next door in the Tropical Hideaway that just recently opened. Otherwise, it was a food item that you could only get in front of the Enchanted Tiki Room, and often I would see queues in front of the Dole Pineapple Whip stand, but no line for the Tiki Room. In fact, you could go around the line in front of the stand, get in line for the Tiki Room, get let into the pre-show area, and buy at that cash register within the queue area.
You just walk into the Tiki Room sometimes if you're there on a good day and there's no line at all and the door's open, ready to go. You just skip around the line at the Dole Whip and just walk into the Tiki Room.
But there's always a line at the Dole Whip.
I recommend getting a Dole Whip before you go. I recommend mobile ordering a Dole Whip while you're turning the corner and walking up to the Dole Whip stand, and then you can just grab it and go.
Yes, exactly.
But this is not an advice podcast for how to attend Disney properly. We're talking about the Tiki Room.
Right. But okay, so the last time that I entered the Tiki Room without some kind of Dole Pineapple Whip in my hand was when I went to the Tiki Room's 50th anniversary party in 2013. When I was a cast member, and we ate Hawaiian pizza inside the Tiki Room.
That's so nice.
And the Pineapple Whip stand, of course, was not open because it was after hours, and we were celebrating 50 years of the Tiki Room. There were only like maybe 50 people at that. It was pretty cool.
That's really nice.
But I wouldn't imagine going as a guest and entering the Tiki Room without a Dole Pineapple Whip, and that's wild, isn't it? That's really strange.
I mean, sure. With very few exceptions like allergies, I would say don't go into there without a Dole Whip in your hand. It adds to the experience, and it has become so synonymous with the Tiki Room, and has, as we talked about before on this show, a cult following of its own. That I feel like at some point you'd be doing yourself a disservice not at least trying it. And it's right there.
And it is right there. And so my question to you, Alice, is why does this attraction get to engage the sense of taste while no other attraction gets to do so? I can't imagine another attraction that gets this. You know what? You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of movie theaters and sports events where getting your hot dog or your popcorn is like part of it.
Yeah, you're right. And there are other attractions at Disney parks that are just shows. But none of them have that I can think of off the top of my head, have the opportunity to grab your snack before you go into your show. Does it have something to do with how long the Tiki Room show is? Or
maybe. Or
is it just how hard Disney has pushed its collaboration with Dole, and how hard the fans have locked into the Dole Whip. It is admittedly a really delicious snack. But there are other delicious snacks at Disney, and there are other shows, and
it's not as if Disneyland doesn't have other food items that are not emblematic of themed areas, right? Like, I always try to get a mint julep when I visit when I'm in New Orleans Square. And
sure.
I know that the Ronto wrap has become a really big thing for visitors of Galaxy's Edge.
It's my favorite food. That is all I will eat for lunch at Disneyland now.
Even within Adventureland, I love going to the Bengal barbecue
and getting a skewer.
Yeah, getting a few skewers for lunch. I mean, these are the things we look forward to about Disneyland that engage our taste buds, and yet no other attraction is like, hey, welcome to the Haunted Mansion. Grab your ghost juice on the way in. Because that sounds terrible, actually.
No, and a lot of the other attractions, like for obvious reasons, don't want you to bring food and drink on. But none of the shows, there wasn't like a little stand outside the Country Bear Jamboree offering a themed snack before you go watch that show. It's just the Dole Whip, and I can't help but thinking, like, it has to be the collaboration with the Dole Pineapple Company, which we will dive into in great detail in another episode. But but Dole has been sponsoring the Tiki Room since the 70s.
Yeah, and I feel like now is a good time to talk about just how visible that sponsorship is around the Tiki Room.
Because it's not just a sign out in front that says sponsored by Dole.
Which is usually the case with sponsorships of attractions at Disneyland.
Yeah,
in this day and age.
With the exception of Autopia, which is very deliberately sponsored by whatever car company, or
it's Honda.
It's Honda now. It used to be Chevron.
Yeah.
Before. Other than that, I can't really think of another example where the advertising is so powerful than the Tiki Room.
And advertising used to be a much bigger part of many Disney attractions. A lot of people will point us towards Epcot for sponsored attractions, but a lot of those sponsorships have expired over the years. Tomorrowland, for example, used to have Journey Through Inner Space sponsored by Monsanto, which we have talked about in the past.
That has aged real well.
Yeah. And it used to, Star Tours used to be very prominently sponsored by Energizer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah. But I would never... Something interesting about the sponsorship of the Dole Pineapple Company of the Enchanted Tiki Room is that it feels almost inseparable, which is odd because they're not even the first sponsors of the attraction.
That's true. As we mentioned last week, United Airlines was the first sponsor of the attraction.
And they're not even the only sponsors of the attraction because the Citrus Board of Florida is the sponsor of the Orlando attraction, actually.
That's true.
So what we're looking at here is this weird space where it seems like Dole and the Enchanted Tiki Room are kind of intertwined, but also it's totally artificial. But you see Dole everywhere in the show, in the pre-show, and you taste Dole all through the show. And no other attraction, maybe with the exception of Autopia, at Disneyland is this forward about advertising. I mean, the Enchanted Tiki Room has a Dole ad in the pre-show.
Yes.
It is
true.
5 minutes of cartoon about how delicious Dole pineapples are. And there's a jingle, and it's like, Dole is the flavor of the islands. And it's very catchy.
Uh-huh.
And that's weird. That's super weird.
It's really weird. And it used to be even more, even I think more strange. The older Dole pineapple advertisement that would play in the pre-show, like through the 90s, was very, let's call it colonialist.
Yeah.
Let's call it maybe almost exploitative. It was, instead of just all about the Dole pineapples, it was like a old-fashioned propaganda film about how awesome Dole is to the Hawaiian Islands, and how important Dole is to Hawaii, and how important Hawaii is to America.
I think it says no less than 2 times in that old film that only kings could eat pineapples back in the day.
So it's a strange.
There's an extended sequence in there where it like glorifies a factory floor where people are chopping up pineapples, and it's like, look at this wonderful factory, so efficient and so great that we're exporting the flavors of Hawaii. And it's like, whoa. This is a lot. They have toned it down quite a lot since then, but it's odd that there's multiple minutes that are focused on a company, not Disney, right here in front of one of their signature classic attractions.
It's definitely strange. And it's so pervasive in the like culture around the Tiki Room. And has attracted such a following. Not like they know Dole like is a company and sponsors it, but they always use the word Dole when they say Dole Whip. They don't say, oh, that pineapple soft serve or even pineapple whip or anything about that. People always refer to it as a Dole Whip. That's not even like its proper title, is it? It's officially a Dole pineapple. It's got a longer name, right? Yeah. But people just call it the Dole Whip.
Yeah.
And without even really thinking about why the word Dole is in there, except that it's like calling all tissues Kleenexes, for example.
Almost. And it's interesting because it seems simultaneously invisible and everywhere, and it's also very, very prominent and called out multiple times. Like, Dole's name is all over the Tiki Room. And yet, we're not like, yes, time to patronize the Dole Company. We're like, oh man, gotta get my pineapple whip, gotta get my Dole Whip. Like,
gotta get my Dole Whip. Without even thinking about what it means. Or the fact that it's really the only place in the park, well, one of only maybe 2 places in the park, where that kind of advertising about another company that's not Disney is so shoved in your face and down your throat. It's overwhelming once you kind of take a step back and look at it, how much it is. And we will obviously elaborate further in another episode about what the Dole Pineapple Company, where they got their start and why they inserted themselves as the name in pineapples. But for now, we're just talking about the attraction.
Yeah.
And I think we should talk. One more thing about the pre-show. Is it the pre-show? What you do when you've got your Dole Whip in your hand and you're sitting out in this little patio waiting to go inside the Tiki Room itself.
I would call this the pre-show, not the pre-show.
The pre-show, where you are, just to take the connection between Dole and the Tiki Room and the Hawaiian Islands one step further, you are surrounded by representations of the gods of the Hawaiian pantheon and like Polynesian gods, and there's Maui and Tangaroa and all of these other god figures represented as little tikis, and they have a cute little rhyming couplet about what they're, what they represent and what they're the god of. And you're sitting there surrounded by signs that say Dole Pineapple, eating your Dole Pineapple, and watching this presentation about Hawaii, or about what's, important to this religion, and all at the same time. You're kind of immersed in it right away.
Yeah, I wanna say like 3 things about the tiki gods out front.
Yes.
1, the ad plays before the tiki gods speak. I think that's a really interesting timing. Like, you have to watch the commercial before the pre-show can even begin. 2, I've more often than not noticed that people pretty much ignore this part of the show. And I've been one of them. Like, I'm not paying a lot of attention to every god as they light up and do their thing. And I feel like it's really odd how these tiki gods are kind of strewn about the outside of this little patio area. And they're almost completely disconnected from a lot of guests. And because it seems like they really tell an interesting part of the story. And 3, they're actually really intricate and cool from an artistic standpoint. Like, it's odd how much is going on with these guys. Pele lights on fire.
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite part.
Yeah, when Pele's like, I'm Pele, and then she like explodes. That's cool. Tangaroa gives birth right there.
Yeah, Tangaroa has the little plants that emerge from other plant, like the plants drop from the branches and get longer, and it's so pretty. It's
really, really close to guests too. It's odd that nobody like reaches up and messes with that. Maybe people do. But
I can imagine kids do.
He goes, stand back, and then down from his branches emerge new tiny gods and life. It's really interesting. I guess if I were to say a 4th thing about this, it's that it's really offensive.
It's very
infantilizing.
Infantilizing, that's a good word. Yeah. It's a very simplistic view of this very complicated, complex, multicultural. It's not just Hawaii, right? Like, there are multiple cultures in like the Polynesian area, and that all kind of share similar gods, or like it's like they combined a bunch of gods from a bunch of different cultures together.
Yeah.
And just present them all as like one pantheon. And it's like the simplified like baby version of what these gods. I'm the god of fire. I'm the god of water. I'm the, and make it really simplified and not intricate or complex at all.
No, everybody gets, like you said, like a rhyming couplet. They like say their name and then they do a little rhyme about what they do. And it's not good. It's not respectful. It doesn't explain anything about them. It does about 8 gods in 5 minutes. And overall, it leaves me feeling weirded out at the end of it all. It feels very 1963, but more than that, it feels very, I don't know, like updating this concept at all might not work in the first place.
Right. And we can talk about that further in another episode. About when we talk about other relations with the Hawaiian Islands and Hawaiian culture in general. We're still just in this second layer here.
Yeah.
So you go inside. And one last thing I think we should just talk about real quick before we go, is maybe we should talk about the host birds for a minute.
Maybe we should talk about the birds in general.
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about all the animatronic actors, but I think the birds are the most prominent.
Yes.
And the host birds are for sure worthy of focus for a moment. Specifically, all of it. the main thing that I want to talk about is that these 4 host birds are 4 national stereotypes.
Yes, you've got Jose, who is supposed to represent Mexico. You've got Pierre, who is supposed to represent France. You've got Michael, who represents Ireland, and you've got Fritz, who represents Germany.
Yeah.
Did I get them all right?
I think you did. And
I didn't look at my notes.
And the thing is, each of them does, like, Pierre is very vain and talks about his profile and he's very French. And, like, Fritz is like, Ach du Liebe, right? And it's like, it's just a lot. And Michael, he's, like, old and salty and and Jose, as kind of the leader of the bunch, he just seems, I don't know, everything about Jose's presentation is problematic.
It is. It is. He's difficult to talk about. He's our leader. He's our host. He speaks first. He makes the most jokes. He speaks the most and has the most over-the-top accent, I think.
I think so. And it's interesting to note that he was voiced by a white man.
Yes.
It's also interesting to note that there are things about how he speaks that are clearly just not reflective of any real life accent.
No, it's definitely like what people in the early 1960s would have thought that all people from Mexico sounded like.
Yeah.
It's very, again, it's very simplified. It's very exaggerated, and it takes no subtleties into account at all. And it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I love Jose. I think he's so funny. His plumage is gorgeous. I love that he's our host. I don't love his accent.
No, and I think you can. This is kind of a problem, to go on a bit of a tangent. It's kind of what I might call Apu syndrome, where Apu is a character on The Simpsons who is Hindu and Indian and is played by a white man. And in many ways, Apu is an interesting, progressive character that is very humanized and humanizing, and is used to explore a lot of really complicated cultural exchanges between white America and Indian Americans. But again, at the end of the day, written and played by white men. So there's still that problematic thing happening there, right?
Right.
So you can still love the character for what he represents and what he brings to the show, but there are still all of those questions about whose voices are actually being heard. And I think Jose represents that same problem, except instead of being a 1990s problem, Jose is a 1960s problem. So instead of being complex and good-natured and representing cultural exchange, Jose is a one big joke character, and again, I would say infantilizing. I would say, like, America and Americans watching this, white Americans specifically, are supposed to be placed in a position of power as the audience and kind of as tourists in this little moment. And Jose is there to be a friendly guide, and trustworthy and funny and silly, yes, but also not with his own complex inner workings. And he doesn't bring any of that to the table. So he's endearing for sure, but there isn't anything else going on with the character.
None of them do. There are four characters four characters with, like, speaking roles in this in the show, and all 4 of them are broken down to their most basic stereotypes of how America, or how 1960s America, views parts of the world. The French guy, Pierre, he doesn't have hardly any, like, redeeming qualities to him at all.
He sings very beautifully.
He does sing very beautifully. But he's very vain, and when he talks to the ladybirds, he's very flirty, and it's very, I mean, it's like how how Americans in the 60s would have been like, oh yeah, France? Yeah, they're a bunch of, snobby, snooty flirts or whatever, which is like not, obviously not true and really silly, but that's just how this show treats its characters with speaking roles, all 4 of them. And I think it's okay that 4 birds who just host a cute show about singing other birds don't have like complex inner lives.
Sure.
But they are very they walk this line and occasionally trip violently over the line into gross stereotypes.
Yeah, and the more we talk about it, the more I start to arrive at a bit of a conclusion about why these birds are the way they are. The question we asked last episode for ourselves was, why are they birds, and why these 4 nations? Like, why these 4 nationalities? And I'm thinking about how there's this infantilization going on with Jose, and this kind of gross stereotyping going on with these other birds, and I remember the infantilization that's happening with the people of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to form a picture in my mind of a worldview where Hawaii is just as exotic as these other far-off lands. Visit Germany, visit France, visit Mexico, visit Hawaii.
Visit Ireland, don't forget Ireland.
I would never. And I feel like it's setting Hawaii up to be familiar. Mexico is our neighbor to the south. Germany, France, Ireland, this is the heritage of many white Americans.
Also places that a lot of white Americans, especially in the early 60s, would be familiar with due to the giant war that just finished.
You might remember it. It was called the American Revolution. No, the World War II.
Obviously.
And the parallels that are being drawn between these kind of cartoony nationalities being represented in the 4 host birds and the cartoony culture that's being represented in these Hawaiian characters, in the pre-show, in the flowers, in the tiki. This is all part of that same American exceptionalism. Like, these are these other places, and you can, it's not that hard to view other places and enjoy their cultures. And it's all part of that othering that's happening here. And I feel like having them be birds and having them be cartoon representations of these 4 nations and having the rest of the room be this cartoony representation of Hawaii draws this parallel as if to say these places are all basically the same. Accessible, friendly, nice, loves Americans. We're Americans. And I feel like that's a very 1963 thing. And I'm starting to uncover, I think, some of what we're going to have to talk about next, which is the history of how we end up with a place like the Enchanted Tiki Room.
Yeah, absolutely. I just was thinking it's suddenly extremely clear what you just said. It's extremely clear why it was originally sponsored by an airline. Hey, fly this airline and go visit these countries that you just kind of met in this Enchanted Tiki Room.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't
and
that
I bet
great?
At the time, Hawaii would have been offering some of the early flights to Hawaii for American tourists. Yeah.
It's true. They were. And that was a big promo and why they decided to, I was just reading about it, why they decided to sponsor at the beginning. And the switch over to Dole doing the sponsoring, I think that's a natural segue here into what we will be talking about in future episodes, where we talk about the history of the American influence in the Hawaiian Islands and where that influence and that takeover brings us to why Disney would want to make a show about Hawaii in the first place.
Yes.
And we will be covering those topics in the future in this very show.
Yeah. And I guess that means that our conversation about layer 2 of Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland has come to an end. But the conversation does continue online.
That's true. It does. We are always online. We're constantly on Twitter. You can follow the show on Twitter at Happy Places Pod. And you can follow us individually on Twitter as well. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram at Alice White THP for those happy places.
And I'm at Buddy_Duquesne. Duquesne is spelled DUQUESNE.
You find us on Twitter. We'll send you a link to our Discord server. If you like Discord, you join that server where we can have big, long conversations about this topic and many, many others. So you should do that.
Yeah,
you should join our Discord.
The Discord server is called Those Happy Podcasts, and that refers to some of our other shows, including Rogue Fun, a podcast story, which is back and really has reached full speed again. We've done 2 episodes, 1 a month for the last 2 months.
Yes, and this last episode was an hour and 40 minutes long, about 5 minutes of film. So if you like Star Wars, you definitely want to tune into this one. And if you want to listen to that and you want to learn more about it and the other shows that we do, you should go ahead and find us on our Patreon, patreon.com/thosehappyplaces.
Yes, on the Patreon, there are many different levels at which you can donate to the show and support what we do on the internet with podcasts. And I would like to extend a special thank you to Charles Gustine of the Iconography Podcast and Aslam Chowdhury for their $7 D-ticket donation.
They are absolutely excellent gentlemen. It was just Aslam's birthday. Happy birthday, Aslam.
Yeah.
And if you want to be one of these people that gets your name read on the show, go ahead and find us at patreon.com/thosehappyplaces.
Yes. Alice, I'm going to add some music to this episode.
And where would you have found that music?
I went out and found this music on the Free Music Archive. This entire show's soundtrack, this miniseries' soundtrack, that is, comes from the Free Music Archive. The album is called Two Zombies Later, and there are multiple tracks from that album. You can find their titles and links to those tracks in the show notes, along with the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license that allows us to use them.
Yes, thank you, Free Music Archive. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Buddy Duquesne, for being such an excellent co-host.
Oh, Alice, I wouldn't dream of doing this show without you. You are my favorite co-host, and I will always appreciate the time and effort that you dedicate to these shows.
Aw, same. You're the best, buddy. You know that.
Thank you. And to everyone out there, thank you for listening, and we hope you return to our tropical hideaway.